offer a few prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, and all the devotees ki jai. So yes, again, I'm really happy to be here with you all, and I hope you are all happy in Krishna consciousness. You look happy in Krishna consciousness. Are you happy in Krishna consciousness? You are. That's good. Right. Well, if we're in Krishna consciousness, we'll be happy. So there you go. But having said that, as our subject matter goes for today, sometimes it happens that devotees, people who are practicing Krishna consciousness, even sometimes great devotees, they undergo difficulties. You know, oftentimes you find, I mean, maybe it's more often than not, you find that people take to some process, some program of religion in order to escape sufferings. I think that's very common indeed, and that sort of idea is there in many people's minds. And sometimes even we, I mean, not much, but I remember going back to those days actually when I was in England in the 70s, right through from January 73. At least I was living in the temple from January the 7th, 1973, till I came here. I left England right at the beginning of 1980 and got here a couple of weeks later, January 1980. So, but when I was there, we would regularly, on a daily basis, we would go out and distribute Srila Prabhupada's books on the streets of all over London. Of course, that's where the temple was. We were based, but we traveled all over. And I went as far north as Aberdeen. That's well into Scotland. And then across to the furthest point of England, you know, out, in the direction of America, you could say. And we really traveled all over. England, Scotland, Ireland also, and Wales. And every day, generally 6 days a week, we were out there on the streets. And, you know, from 9-ish or 9:30 or so, we'd get out until 5 or even 6. In the evening, we'd be distributing books out there, and we'd meet so many people. And sometimes we'd meet people, not often, but occasionally, we'd meet people who'd say, you know, why are you doing this? Why we're being Krishna conscious? Why are we following what to them is just, you know, some religion or other? And they would say, that some of them would say, you are being escapists. Yes, you're just trying to escape from, obviously, they're saying, it's interesting if you think about it, they're saying that, yeah, we're trying to escape. And that's what they think. In other words, they think it's a bad situation because otherwise they wouldn't use the word escape. Yeah, because you only generally escape from bad places. So why are you're just being escapists? And Prabhupada, when he was asked that question or told, someone spoke to him like that, Prabhupada would say, yes, we want to escape because it's a prison house, it's terrible, it's not nice. So we want to escape, of course we want to escape. Yeah, there was once I saw, many years ago, there was a cartoonist, doing these little short little cartoon strips or even just single picture cartoons in newspapers. And I can't remember his name, but he was quite prominent in that field. And he did, I think he was Australian, he did pictures, cartoons of things like nuclear war and things like that kind of confrontational type cartoons. And one cartoon I remember very vividly was, there's on top of the hill is a slaughterhouse for the animals. And there's a whole queue of animals going into the slaughterhouse. And not just a queue, but there's like two fences, and the animals are going up between the fences and into the slaughterhouse, and you know the rest of the story. But, so there's a family of pigs, Mr. and Mrs. Pig, and their two piglets, their two little children. And the two little children, the little piglets, they slipped through the fence and ran off. And so there they are now, they're running off, and their parents are in the queue, moving up there between the fences towards this slaughterhouse. And Mr. Pig says to Mrs. Pig, they're watching their children running away, and Mr. Pig says, just see the younger generation, no sense of responsibility. I thought it was quite a good one. Yeah. So people would say like that in many cases they have this idea that people practice religion in order to escape from the usual difficulties that people go through in worldly life. People, devotees or people, religionists, are trying to escape. But now here, we hear that, well, the question is, how is it that sometimes devotees, they find some suffering there as they're trying to practice their Krishna consciousness, their religious life? How could it be if religion is meant to be something to save you so you can escape into, some happier position, then how is it that sometimes, not that it's not all the time and it's not everyone, but sometimes some devotees while they're seriously practicing Krishna consciousness, they undergo some difficulty. Good question. Because, apparently you're meant to escape by taking up Krishna consciousness. You're meant to escape all that. And indeed, if we look at the histories, then we see that, for example, Arjuna, great devotee, very great devotee of Lord Krishna, one of the greatest. But there he was on the battlefield in great anxiety. He was not happy. At least to start off with, he wasn't happy at all about the whole situation. Or, for example, actually for that matter, the same Arjuna and his brothers and their mother, Kunti, they were exiled into the forest. And they lived in the forest for how many years? 13, 14 years or something. Really living in the forest, literally under the trees. And just sort of eking out some sort of existence, some fruits or roots, whatever they could find to eat, and no comfortable living with nice prasadam and all of that. And even having said that, then Lord Ram, who's not just a devotee, but he's actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, and his wife, Mother Sita, who's a devotee, but, very, very special devotee, and Lord Ram's brother Lakshman, they were also exiled for 14 years. And they also were just living under the trees, and then, in the later stages, Sita Devi, Lord Ram's wife, was kidnapped. And Lord Ram was just devastated by that. So you see, there's some suffering going on in this thing, which according to some people, you're meant to just escape those things. But it seems that it's not always that simple. It doesn't necessarily always work that way. So how is it? I want to just read. It's not even a full verse. It's just a line, or it might be 2 lines. Quoted by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Madhurya Kadambini, his book about the different stages of progress and development in Krishna consciousness. So he quotes one verse, Nidanatva Maharogo Mad Anugraha Lakshanam. The person without the malady of material possessions is the object of my mercy. That's interesting, isn't it? The person without the malady means sickness, literally. The person without the malady, the sickness of material possessions, is the object of my mercy. And in the same vein, but taking it a step further, there's a famous verse. It's actually in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto. There's a famous verse. It's in the 8th chapter of the first canto. The prayers of Queen Kunti. Queen Kunti is offering her prayers to Lord Krishna as he is about to leave Hastinapur for Dwaraka. And there the actual Sanskrit I forget offhand, but translation is what she says is that you, Lord Krishna, you are the property of the materially impoverished. That's interesting. There's so many interesting things in Krishna consciousness. And another one around the same place. Austerity is the wealth of the Brahmins. Brahmins generally meaning the more spiritually advanced people, devotees. So, these are just different perspectives, you could say, on this theme, this idea. And the idea basically being that when you take to spiritual life, to religious life, you can't necessarily just expect that whatever difficulties you've been having, that they're just going to evaporate and go away, and they just, it'll be happy days. Happy days are here again. It was a favorite song of my father's. Yes. It was from the end of the Second World War. Yeah. So, but it's very interesting. So the idea is there in many people's minds, whether they think you're being an escapist by taking to spiritual life or religious life or Krishna consciousness, or not necessarily specifically that, but definitely the idea is there in many people's minds that you take to religion in order to become free from many problems, some type of liberation, salvation. Yeah, deal with your problems and become happier. But actually, that's not really what religion is about. Srila Prabhupada said about Krishna consciousness specifically, but in principle it applies to whatever type of process of religion you might encounter. But in regards to Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada said that Krishna consciousness, well, he sort of raised a question, rhetorical question, a question which not really like a serious question, that what is Krishna consciousness? And Prabhupada then answered the question, Krishna consciousness means developing a personal relationship with Krishna, but it's disguised as a process. Process meaning, some system of doing this and not doing that, and then doing something else and not doing something else. It's a process. Yeah, like a mechanical system, basically. Step A, then step B, and then step C. That sort of thing. It's a process. The fact is, of course, that Srila Prabhupada did refer to Krishna consciousness sometimes as a process anyway. But ultimately, what is it about? It's about developing a personal relationship with Krishna. And when you're developing a personal relationship with someone, we all have personal relationships. We all have many personal relationships. And during the course of our lives, other relationships come and some go. life is just like a whole lot of relationships. That's one way of looking at it. So in the different relationships we have, generally it's not a good idea in any of your relationships, literally any of them, just to be on automatic pilot. Just do it. No, generally with relationships you got to think about the other person and how to deal with them and what to be a little careful about. Relationships. I mean, one point about relationships is you have to care. You have to care, to take the trouble, to consider the other person in terms of what they like and don't like, and you can't just have it all your way. Just take me as I come, and, no. So often, between husband and wife, you got to consider each other. Otherwise, you get into, you upset your partner, and you can upset them really badly, and it can even permanently damage the relationship, or at least, cause serious difficulty in the relationship. So Krishna consciousness means developing a relationship with Krishna. And the same principle of, what does Krishna like? What does he not like? What should I do? What should I not do? All these considerations are there. When I was young, some of you who are around my age, there's not so many of you. I remember when I used to be the youngest one in the class, in the program, yeah. Now I'm often the oldest one, but anyway. Yeah. So, what was I saying?
Some of you will remember when you were younger.
I know when I was younger. What was it? So you're not listening.
About the process, do this, don't do that.
Krishna likes and this.
Okay, yeah, Krishna likes, Krishna doesn't like. Oh yeah, okay. Now what I was going to say. When I was young, I probably in my teens, so there was a movie which I went to see, a very famous movie. It was called Love Story. Anyone remember Love Story? I can't remember who was in it, but it was extremely famous. And it was about a couple, love story, but one of them got some terminal disease. Yeah, and, as I recall, eventually died. And one famous line in that movie, which was really, people caught hold of, was, love means not having to say you're sorry. It just happened a few years ago, probably during COVID, I came across an article sort of reviewing that, and the conclusion of, actually it was devotees. It was, something written by a devotee. And what the devotee, who had obviously seen the movie back in those days, and his conclusion was, love means saying you're sorry. Not just thinking you can just do anything and that your partner just has to just take it and, it's okay because they love you. But love means saying you're sorry. In other words, being considerate and not just selfish. I mean, it's amazing how self-centered people usually are. Talk about looking after number one. Yeah. So in our, if we take Krishna consciousness, which is what it is developing our personal relationship with Krishna, we really got to learn. Like sometimes when you have, particularly in marriages, there's a term, you have to learn the other person, who they are, what they are, and you got to learn them. And not just so you know how to push their buttons, but so you can actually have a nice, relationship back and forth with each other. So, so with Krishna it's like that too. We have our 4 regulative principles of no intoxication, no illicit sex, no meat eating, no gambling, basically. Those are the 4 regulative principles. So part of Krishna consciousness, and it's there, in all the major religions, that when you eat, in Krishna consciousness, we specifically offer the food to the Lord. In other processes, like I was brought up as a nominal Christian, at best, but anyway, theoretically, that's what I was meant to be. And so we would sometimes say grace. When we had a meal, we would sit down, we would say grace, some sort of words of thanks. So that goes on, there's halal with the Muslims and kosher with the Jewish people. So you usually find something when you eat, there's something there. And in Krishna consciousness, we specifically offer to Krishna. By the way, I'm not going off on a tangent, if you think I am. This is all part of, it's strategic, you could say. Strategic presentation. You'll see in a little while. So, okay. So we offer what we are going to eat to Krishna. And when we prepare it, we're meant to think, what would Krishna like? And try and do it in some nice way that Krishna might find pleasing. So, but so many people think that, when we eat, we must eat some meat. And particularly, if there's some important occasion, then we must eat meat. And so, now if they come across this idea that we must offer our food to God for His pleasure, and they think, okay, something nice. Yes, I'll offer a nice steak, because he thinks that's what's nice. He doesn't know what Krishna likes and doesn't like. But he's just going by his own standards. I should offer God something nice to eat. Yeah. Some sort of meat or something like that. But, and so he offers it. And he's thinking, yes, look, here I am. I'm offering something nice. But actually it's offensive to Krishna. It's really offensive. Basically what you've done is either directly or indirectly via the butcher's shop, but either directly or indirectly, you've killed one of his children who he feels for, he has affection for. You've killed one of his children, and now you're serving the child up on the plate with a big smile. Oh, look, something nice I prepared for you. So you see, there's a problem. If you are trying to develop a relationship with a person, but you don't understand the person well enough to know what will please them, what won't please them, and in the name of pleasing them, you offend them. And what's that going to do for your attempt at making a relationship? Obviously, it's not going to help. So, yeah. So now coming back to this point of why do devotees sometimes suffer when they're practicing Krishna consciousness, which many people are thinking is meant to help you escape problems and, become more peaceful and all that sort of thing. But then you see that some of these famous devotees, we mentioned a few, that there they are and they are suffering in their Krishna consciousness. So there's a sort of a bottom line to it, and to that point. And in one sense, the bottom line is that we have been brought up in so many ways to think that certain things are nice and good and we should do them and have them, but actually they're not good. Like in this case of eating meat, it's immensely destructive spiritually. It's hugely destructive, but people are thinking that it's very nice. So, like if you ever read the Bible, the New Testament, you'll see that from time to time Jesus eats something. Yeah, there's a number of places, occasions where he sits down and eats something. And one of our devotees did a study of all of that. And it seemed like whenever Jesus sat down to eat something, it was meat. Sort of like you sit down to have a cup of morning tea and you don't just have a biscuit or something, you have some meat. Which led the devotee and leads us to believe there's some sort of, they're trying to promote it actually. Yeah, it's not an honest presentation. Like Jesus is not just what they would call omnivorous. Most people are omnivorous. They eat meat, they eat vegetables, they're omnivorous. But it's almost like Jesus is carnivorous. Once I was distributing books in London in the mid-70s, and right in the centre of London, there's a street called Carnaby Street. Anyway, I was distributing books there, and this one young fellow, like 12, like a schoolboy, came up to me, and he seemed a little interested, so I gave him a book. But he had no money, but I had some prasadam, little sweets, simply wonderfuls. So I gave him one. I said, here, take this and eat it, it's nice. It's vegetarian. And he looked at it, and he looked at it, and he walked off. A few minutes later, he came back, and he said, with the sweet, and he said, no, I can't take it back, please. I said, what's wrong? He said, no, my mother's just over there. I met my mother, and she told me, no, we can't eat it. we are Satanists. We only eat meat. No kidding. Yeah, so, sure. I mean, there's some interesting people around. But the problem is, we are attached to many things which are impediments to developing our relationship with Krishna. But we're very attached to them. We're really attached to them. And for us to give them up, it can be very difficult. For some people to give up meat is very difficult. I mean, generally it's not that difficult, but for some people it's very difficult. For some people to give up smoking, it's extremely difficult. To give up, I mean, even something like gambling can be extremely difficult to just give up, just like free sex life, any time like that. It can be very difficult indeed. To live a celibate life can be very difficult. But the thing is that actually if you do those things, means if you smoke, if you eat meat, and even onions and garlic for that matter, and you take intoxicants, they cause great suffering. And they're impediments in developing a relationship with Krishna. So therefore Krishna sometimes, in order to teach you that actually I shouldn't do like this or like that, Krishna puts you in a situation where you suffer in relation to that particular activity. Or, like so many people are so anxious about accumulating money, but Krishna puts you in a situation where money causes you great difficulty. You get into great financial difficulty. This sort of thing happens. Or even, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Prabhupada's spiritual master, would say that, he had 64 temples, and they were usually short of money, which was a source of anxiety. We have a similar situation in ISKCON Pretoria, by the way. At least we usually do. I remember I had to pay off the bond right a few years ago. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, it's good if the temple is in a little debt, not too much, but a little debt, because it'll keep the devotees concerned. We got to keep it together and be on top of things. So it'll cause them some anxiety. But then through that, they understand that, this whole money business, it causes pain, competition. Yeah. So devotees suffer. Like I mentioned, Lord Ram, Mother Sita was kidnapped. And Lord Ram got into extreme anxiety. It's amazing, actually. If you read Ramayana, it's about 5 chapters, and it's simply Lord Ram expressing his anxiety that Sita has been kidnapped. And not just expressing his anxiety, but threatening the demigods and the demons, and just threatening, give me back my wife, or I will destroy the universe. But over 5 chapters. And, interesting little point. hear this, please. There's a verse, if you go through the 9th canto, the 10th chapter of the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, which is the main part of the story of Lord Ram. From his childhood until he is crowned, finally, after killing Ravana. I mean, there's another chapter afterwards about Ram, but that's sort of the main one. And there, one of the verses, it says that Lord Ram, his wife, one of the reasons he appeared and his wife Sita was kidnapped and he was thrown into such anxiety was, devotees, to show that excessive attachment between male and female and male, that type of relationship is a cause of great distress. And I was just reading today and yesterday, preparing for our upcoming Bhakti Vaibhava. Prabhupada was emphasizing that so much, that how valuable it is if you can maintain celibacy, happily maintain celibacy. Because if you can't, and therefore you have to get into the whole family way of life, there's a lot of difficulty. But as the Bhagavatam says, that the experienced householder on the other side of the household ashram, in other words, retiring from household life in older age, comes out the other side like what does it say? Like a warrior who has been, sort of like being beaten, that sort of, and he comes out the other side like, wow, made it. Now you might think I'm getting carried away here, but this is Srimad Bhagavatam. So these difficulties which devotees suffer, sometimes we get sick. And what is that? It's Krishna's mercy, because he's showing us that these material bodies, it doesn't matter practically, it doesn't matter what you do, but you're going to get sick sooner or later. You could be Mr. or Miss, super duper healthy, fit, at the gym an hour a day, 8 days a week, or something like that. But you're going to get sick. You're going to get sick. And it's a suffering. And that's Krishna's mercy to teach you. No more material bodies, please. No more. Yeah. So that's actually the bottom line, so to speak, with all these difficulties that devotees sometimes go through. That being Krishna is kindly teaching them lessons, how to live, what to do and what not to do, so that we can learn, what's wrong with the material world on one side and why we shouldn't be attached to it, but what actually pleases Krishna and what displeases Krishna. And sometimes, because we're a little thick-headed, sometimes we need to get a bit of a bash on the head. Wake up. Yes. So these difficulties which devotees go through, they're actually they're generally educational experiences, directly, indirectly, in different ways, helping us to learn different things. learn what's wrong with the material world, that we shouldn't be attached to the material world, that we really must not be attached to it, because it's a nightmare. It's such a nightmare. Just when you think things are not too bad, maybe the ANC are going to settle down and learn how to be a proper government, and you're thinking something like that, and suddenly COVID happens. Who expected that? And then suddenly, COVID's sort of easing off, and suddenly Russia and Ukraine, and the whole world's upside down. And who knows, Donald Trump might become president again. Ooh, another interesting experience. Hare Krishna. So devotees, when devotees suffer, it's 99.9% of the time, 100 you could say, it's Krishna's trying to teach you something that you need to learn. And if you didn't get it in sort of a more dramatic way, it wouldn't really sink in so much. And sometimes, therefore, because it doesn't sink in enough, we have to go through the same sort of thing again and again. And eventually we get it, oh, I see, okay. Yeah. Right. Like one devotee I know, and most of you know, but I won't mention his name. He used to love eating chilies with his sabji. Oh, he'd have it like on fire. Wow. But that's not how we really offer food to the Lord for his pleasure. It was just more, he liked that. And then he got, I don't know exactly what he got, but he got something as a result of that. And now he has, like unspiced. So Krishna. Krishna is very clever, and he knows how to teach us lessons. Of course, we have to pray to Krishna, please give me the intelligence to understand what lesson you're trying to teach me. Because sometimes it may be a little subtle. But every time we'll find there's a lesson that I need to learn, and Krishna's giving it to me by some difficulty. Of some sort. And so the end result is that we learn how to be the type of person that Krishna likes. And in sort of the middle of the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, he gives a whole list of qualities of a person. If I can get there. A whole lot of personal qualities of a devotee, which, Krishna says that my devotee, someone who is like this, is very dear to me. Let me just read the first one. It's chapter 12, verses 13 and 14 are together. And so Krishna says, that Krishna is teaching me that don't depend on computers too much. They also have minds of their own. One who is not envious but as a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who's equal in both happiness and distress, who's tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. And Krishna goes on, that's verses 13 and 14 together. But he goes on through till verse 20, which is the last verse of the chapter, saying, it's the same thing. This, like that, like something else, very dear to me. There's these several verses like that. And Srila Prabhupada gave a class on those two verses together that we just read. And if you've got Prabhupada's books on your computer, look it up and you'll see that Prabhupada begins the class by saying, yes, this is Krishna consciousness. How will Krishna love me? Yeah. How will Krishna love me? Not as we normally think, how will I love Krishna? Which, is also a good point. But this is an interesting sort of, from the other perspective, how will Krishna love me? How can I become such a person that Krishna will love me? Instead of being, let's face it, I am now the type of person who loves me, mainly. And if things are not, according to me, then no, I reject them like that. But how will I become that sort of person? So in order to learn that, dear devotees, you've got to go a bit through this. There's a bit of a school of hard knocks, because we've got a lot of the wrong ideas deeply entrenched in our minds, deeply entrenched. And a lot of them, the only way to get them out is to sort of get them kind of beaten out of us a bit, at least to some degree. So therefore devotees suffer sometimes, but it's actually Krishna's mercy. Krishna's trying to help them to learn how to become that person that Krishna will love. Because he doesn't love selfish people who don't care about anybody else and who'll eat anything and do anything if it feels good, and that sort of, he doesn't love that sort of person. I mean, on a certain level, he does. But in terms of like a real direct relationship and interpersonal relationship, he doesn't love that sort of person. Yeah, so therefore all these difficulties which occur, they're Krishna's mercy. And let me conclude by telling you a little story, which I'm sure many of you have heard before. It's a nice one. That there was a king and he had a minister. And the king liked to go out hunting and the minister would go with him. And one time they went out and the king was going to fire an arrow at something, but he slipped. The arrow kind of jumped off the bow and cut off the top of his thumb. Right off. And the king said, "Look at that! Oh no! Look at my thumb! Oh, it's terrible." But the minister was a real devotee. I mean, a real devotee. He said, "It's Krishna's mercy." And the king said, "What do you mean Krishna's mercy? Look at this. This is not mercy. This is a disaster. I've lost part of my thumb." And the minister said, no, it's Krishna's mercy. And the king got angry. Stop saying it's Krishna's mercy. But it is Krishna's mercy. You stop it. And he had the minister arrested and locked up. And some days or whatever, weeks or something, his thumb, was sort of manageable. And the king went out hunting again, but without the minister, because the minister's locked up in jail. And the king got lost. And he got arrested by some aboriginals, sort of people. And they arrested him, and they said that, you're an important man, you're the king. We want to give you a special honor. Yes, we are going to make you a human sacrifice to Mother Kali. It's a great honor. It is your lucky day. So, the king, he is totally fried. So the priest of the Aboriginals checks. Now, it's the big day has come. And he checks the body of the king to make sure his body is whole. Because if his body, if something's wrong, then he can't be offered to Kali. It would be Kali Aparad. So he's checking. And he says, look at this. What happened to your thumb? Oh, no, I'm so sorry to say, we can't offer you to Kali. Go. Just get out. So the king was released and was walking away thinking, the minister was right. It was Krishna's mercy, it was. So he went running back, released the minister and apologized and said, I'm so sorry I had you locked up. That was terrible, what an offense. And the minister said, no, it was Krishna's mercy. And the king said, no, it wasn't, it was my stupidity. And the minister said, no, it was Krishna's mercy, you locked me up. Because if you hadn't, I would have been with you out there in the forest. And I would have been arrested with you. And my body is whole. They would have offered me to Kali. But I was locked up back here. So it was Krishna's mercy. So you see, whatever happens to a devotee, we're talking about devotees, people who are really trying to be devotees. Whatever happens, it's Krishna's mercy, even if there's some suffering. Yeah. So, let me just, come on computer, there you go. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the Lord, thinking of the welfare of his devotee, in order to increase the devotee's humility and longing for the Lord, bestows on him all sorts of suffering as his mercy. This mercy is not the effect of sinful actions from previous lives, but it is the direct intervention of the Lord to help his devotee. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, there we go. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So shall we have... Sorry? Question? Yes, sir.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for enlightening us. I just wanted to follow up on that the devotee that...
I can't hear two things.
Sorry.
What?
Okay, so the devotee was doing the study on the food that Jesus Christ was eating.
Right.
I haven't read the Bible, but I'm interested to know what was the conclusion. Because in another class I once heard that Lord Jesus Christ never ate meat, he may have distributed it. So what was the conclusion of that study?
Anyway, you can download this thing. It's there. It's called, Do You Mean It Says That in the Bible? It's a booklet. Do you mean it says that in the Bible? You can download it. And it's got all these things there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, what happened?
Could you repeat the question for the devotees on live translation?
Oh, okay.
When the next question comes.
Is there a question online?
No, like the devotees who ask questions here, they don't have a
Oh,
microphone.
could I repeat? Oh, okay. If there's a next question, I will repeat it for the devotees online. Yes, sir.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for the very wonderful class. Okay. Sometimes the relationships between devotees become not so nice. Is that also Krishna's mercy?
So,
I'm being politically correct. Sorry.
sorry.
I'm being politically correct.
You were very, very gentlemanly about it. So the question of, I think you should have heard it online, but sometimes relationships between devotees become a little otherwise, sort of. So is that Krishna's mercy? Well, what would really, in a sense, in that if the relationship becomes strained, then you can make the effort and use your intelligence how to make the relationship better or proper or like that. But also, relationships become strained because we do things, oftentimes because we do things which to some degree or other offend the other person or they offend us, And, someone, the six Goswamis, Dira adira jana priyo priyakaro. Dira adira. Priya priyakaro. They were dear to the Dira means like the nice people, the cultured people, and to the adira means like the low class people, the whatever drunkards and the not nice people. But they all loved them because they were so nice in their interactions that people couldn't help but like them. Even Prabhupada, there's the famous story with Giriraj Maharaj. Prabhupada meeting his parents, and the parents, they were not very happy about their son being a full-time devotee. They were really not very happy at all. But Prabhupada dealt with them so nicely that their whole perspective on the situation changed, and they became very positive. And Maharaj said to Prabhupada that, Srila Prabhupada, you're so wonderful. Everybody loves you. And Prabhupada replied, yes, because I love everybody. Yeah, so, in such situations where there may be some strain, it's not like causeless. Generally, we or both of us have done some things which have caused it to become like that. And if we've got, we can pray to the Lord, help me to understand, what did I do which contributed to it becoming not so nice? Then it's really Krishna's mercy if we can learn. Because we should try, it's very important we try to become the type of devotee who never offends anyone else. that even if you have to tell someone something, like disciplinary or something like that, but you can do it in such a way that at the end the person doesn't think, he chastised me, he shouted at me or whatever. But the other person thinks, I really learned something now, how to become a better devotee, and like that. And Prabhupada was expert at that, teaching people to stop doing the wrong things in such ways, although they like doing the wrong things, but teaching them how to stop doing them in such ways that the people think, that's great. I'm really glad that he taught me that. Does that make sense? Hare Krishna. There we go, devotees. Oh yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So to follow on Prabhu's question, is it safe to assume that the same principles will apply as far as your spouse choosing you or you choosing your spouse? Is that also Krishna's mercy?
That is a brilliant question. See, he put his mask back on. Hopes his wife doesn't recognize him. Okay. There are certain decisions in life which should be made, with due consideration and thought, and not just spur of the moment or just emotionally or only emotionally. So choosing or being chosen, the process of spousal choice is one of those things, because let's face it, it's a decision, it's a choice which has, pretty major implications for the rest of your life or, your ongoing life. So, therefore traditionally, they would do it. These things would be done very carefully. And if you really go back, then the children, the boy and the girl who are the ones who they're going to be married, they wouldn't very much participate in the process of the choosing. Definitely not like today, where the parents, effectively, the parents may not say it literally, but effectively they say, just go for it and let us know, when you make your choice. You get me? One devotee just not 6 months ago told me that's what her father told her. When you find someone, you want to marry them, just tell me then. But I don't want to meet him before. So, it's a deep subject. It's not just, it's not just how you feel. And, they do astrological things and all sort of personality studies. And when I say astrological, means not just like what you read in the newspaper, that sort of astrology. So your question was, is it Krishna's mercy that you end up with ... as opposed to ... Well, in a sense, yes, because if you make the right choice, then, and your wife is a devotee like you, and has a similar nature to you. In other words, there's real compatibility between the two of you. That can be very helpful for your Krishna consciousness. And if, as unfortunately, a fair percentage of people do, if someone makes the wrong choice, then you learn. Be more careful about your choices. And that's Krishna's mercy. There's a lot we could say about it, but those are some thoughts. Hare Krishna. On that note, let us conclude. And we'll have, is it Guru Puja? What do we do now?
Yes, Maharaj.
Sorry. Yeah.
So, just quickly, thank you Maharaj for that wonderful and amazing realizations and for helping us devotees understand why it is suffering